Gig Gab, episode 432 for Monday, June 3rd. Old time player piano day, but Friday was National Save Your Hearing Day, which might apply a little bit more to what's going on in this episode, June 3rd, 2024. Greetings, folks, and welcome to Gig Gab, the show by, for, and about working musicians here in Durham, New Hampshire. I am Dave Hamilton, and today, as promised, we're going to be talking about in-ear monitors, what to get, how to use them, a compendium, if you will. And for that, I brought on the best person that we know to do this, Mr. Daniel East. Dan, it's a pleasure having you back. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for having me back. I love coming on and doing this stuff with you, as I always have. It's
Same.
Just a joy.
Same. It's always great. Yep. And we spend, a half hour chit-chatting and going in random directions before we even start recording, and I love that too. So
yeah, we've known each other for a minute.
A little bit. Yep. You've been playing before we get into the in-ears thing, because we actually have a question from listener Amanda that will get us rolling into a good entry point for all of us before Dan and I take it into crazy places later in the episode, which we will. We're also going to talk about some of the more unspoken parts about in-ears, including the stuff that's in your ears, but we'll get there. Played any notable gigs or had any experiences to share recently, Dan?
There's a lot of fun stuff that's been going on. I'm still, the last time we spoke, we were in studio working on this record that I'm both producing and playing on. And we are about a year into this project, and we're recording the last song in a couple of weeks. We're in rehearsals now, and we've had a really great time. The band is just sounding great. Really, really good people.
Remind me of the name of the band or the artist.
His name is Jay Bernardo. Young guy. Is his first release, and they are just the coolest band. Very diverse. They're from all over the world. Everybody brings something different to the table. Yep. And then the team that we have mixing and mastering is just world class all the way around, and it's different. And the thing that I love actually about doing it is a little different from my usual style, from the musically what I would always, I kind of lean into stuff that might sound like me or what I would write. And this is one of those really kind of pushes me to explore arrangement and orchestration, even though it's a rock band. It's really fun. That's been really cool. And mixing a whole bunch of stuff, and getting to just be out and feeling like it feels like music again. And everybody talks about, it's old news to talk post-COVID, but now to be out and to go out and to be on these gigs and to see some of the shows, especially the scale of them, Dave, man, there are people that are bringing production into smaller venues down here. And of course it's getting hotter. I'm in Florida, so it's getting a lot warmer down here now, but to go out at night and to see some of these shows that have just the most unbelievable production, because it's more manageable now. So people are putting more into the the trickle down of like the moving LEDs, and they're so easy to operate now, and they're quieter and they're lighter and they're smaller, and so it's kind of cool. It's really felt like things are moving again, and that's been a lot of fun. So,
well, I mean, it not only are things moving again, but there's an evolution that has happened in terms of these productions. I mean, in terms of everything, right? But being able to see that. I agree. There's still, I mean, I mentioned it in the last episode that I did, which was just me, where I talked about, like, I'm still finding my path post-COVID. I've got a couple of bands that just didn't quite, make the jump, which, as I'm hearing from lots of you, is not uncommon at all, right? And so now it's finally like getting to the point where it's like, okay, I need to kind of give up on that. That's not going to recover. So let's do some other things and let's open those doors, which is great. I mean, and
they're morphing into new things too, and it's a very old school thing. It's sort of a history repeating itself in terms of how the bands have morphed and adapted, accordingly. But it's also really cool, and to see that it's not only musically getting better and people are saying, hey, what I thought I was into before, maybe, would take a different direction or whatever. Yep. But at the same time, to see it sort of become elevated in a way where you're finding your capabilities, people aren't afraid to kind of push a little harder musically, and it's not contrived. It actually sounds really good and it feels good, and you can see the reaction from people again. There was a long period of time where we didn't have any interaction with anybody,
as
you know, and
so very well. No we all know.
Feedback. Yeah. But now that you have audience integration again,
I have to wonder.
Are changing.
I think that there's an element of we've learned not to take it for granted quite as much as we used to, and I don't just say that from the performers aspect, but from the audience members aspect. Like, people that come to the gigs, they're there and want to be there, and they understand that it's a choice to be there versus sitting on your couch, right? Because we all figured out how to make sure we were as entertained as we could possibly be on our couches. First of all, our couches got comfortable. Our sound systems at home got improved, right? Like all of, we've got bigger screens at home. We figured out all the streaming stuff. We've got our, high-speed fiber connections and all that stuff because we had to. And now to leave that is a choice. And it's one that people are making intentionally, as opposed to just, well, it's Friday, where are we going to go? It's like, Friday, are we going to go? And when we do, we're there and we're present. And, I just played with Bitter Pill again. We record this about a week in advance, so I'll have some gigs from right before this releases to talk about maybe in the next episode. But we just on Sunday night of Memorial Day weekend, we played at this place called the Music Hall Lounge in Portsmouth, which is a venue we've played 3 times now, all sort of post-COVID. In fact, the venue has only existed for 2 years, just about 2 years. And it's a listening room. Like, people come, they reserve their table, and they sit there and listen. I mean, they applaud, don't get me wrong, but it's not like a raucous bar where everybody's up and there's just like the din of noise. People, like, between songs, if people aren't applauding, they are quiet. I've seen people shush each other at these gigs, which is, that's awesome.
How many, what size venue is it?
I think it would hold about 150 people all seated. So, I think if you took the tables out, it'd probably hold 350. It's that kind of size.
What kind of system are they running? What kind of PA is it?
The mixer is an M32, which I have some things to talk about that when we get into the ears thing. No, and they've got, oh crap, I can't remember what brand the arrays are, but they've got like 3 arrays on either side of the stage that fill the room really well. People say the sound in there is great. So
that's awesome.
It's great. And they designed the room for music, so it's got no reflective or minimal reflective surfaces. It sounds good in there. Wood snare drums do not sound good in there. Metal snare drums, much better. But you figure that out when you go into a room. You got to bring everything and try it all out. But yeah, no, it's good. In fact, that was Sunday night. That was gig number 8 of my weekend. I finished a run of Spring Awakening at a theater, about a half a mile from there, also in Portsmouth, on Sunday afternoon. But we played Wednesday, Thursday, and then 2 shows on Friday and Saturday each, and then Sunday afternoon. And as soon as we finished on Sunday, I had to load out and hoof it across town to play this gig. So it was a lot.
So wait, playing? Are you singing on all these gigs too, or are you just playing on? Like, I've seen your gig schedule, of course, but I mean,
sure.
When you do back to back to back like this, what role are you playing in all these different things?
It depends. For the theater shows, for this particular theater show, I was not singing. Right. So it was, I played, it was 8 gigs, behind the drums. But it was, Monday was the first day where I didn't put ears in like I think it had been 8 days since I had not spent a day with ears in my ears from.
And when you're done the gig, do you just shut off for a while and let your ears rest?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's something I always recommend to people.
Yeah.
When you're done, like you have to let your ears rest.
Yes.
Like there's stimulation happens over a period of time, even if it's one set, you have to let your ears calm down.
Oh yeah. I noticed, I think it was Saturday, because we had gigs, we had a 2:00 show and an 8:00 show. So I did the show, obviously at 2:00. And then we had like tacos or something for the cast and the crew and the band and everything, which was fine. And then it was like, oh, I need to like go for a walk somewhere because my ears, like, it was nice being, having a social moment with everyone, but that meant that it extended my ear exposure to sound by an extra 45 minutes to an hour. And I was like, no, before I go plug these things back in, I gotta go somewhere else.
Yeah, you need zero.
I need as close to zero as I can get. If I'm
home, I'll go down to the beach and just sit there and just let that white noise just. It's really pink noise at the beach. Actually,
it's pink noise. Yeah,
it's just crazy. Like, just to have that cleaning of my.
Yes.
Not to mention the salt air was great, but I mean
that's good. Yeah. I was right on the water, so I did a similar thing. I just kind of walked down by the edge of the water and stayed away from people, so I wasn't having a conversation. I wasn't hearing conversations. I was, staying away from cars. So yeah, that's good.
There's a really cool thing. It's listening to 20,000 Hertz the other day, and I know you had our buddy on, and how cool their episode. They were talking about how much sound occurs in the ocean, and how much sound pollution from ships and stuff affects that, even in a different way as it does to us on land. And you think that we have sound pollution. It's disrupted and this is something I use when I train people about how sound travels, where it used to be that if a whale would call out in Hawaii, they could hear it in California or something to that effect, which is no longer the case because of the shipping and sonar and all the things that exist underwater now. It's a great episode, actually.
Huh. All right. I'll put a link to that in the show notes too. Let's answer Amanda's question, and then we'll give ourselves permission to stop answering her question. But it's a good place to start. Amanda reached out and said, okay, I'm ready. I want to get in-ear monitors. I want to be able to control my mix. I want to hopefully be able to control the amount of exposure that I get to my ears, but I'm on a budget. Let's say I have $300 max to spend all in. What would you choose? What path would you go down? So, everybody that asks me about ears, on the theater gigs that I'm on the, everywhere else, loves seeing that I have custom fit in-ears. And they're like, okay, how can I do that? I have $300 to spend, or even $400 to spend. It's like, you're not going to like the answer that I'm going to give you, but I'm with one asterisk, and I will get to the asterisk. I would say start with universal fits, because you want to make sure that this is going to work for you. You want to find a path that's going to work for you. And if you want to do custom fit in-ears, you're probably, I would say in fact, I know that you can do it all in for double that. Maybe $500, but certainly for $600.
But do you want to?
Well, but the question is,
it's not for everybody. That's
the thing. It's not for everyone. Correct.
Yeah, everybody loves the idea of using ears, and it is an amazing concept. I was there, at the very beginning. That. And I've watched this evolve, and to see that it is much easier to do it now, even at any scale. Is the $300 just for the earpieces, or is that for a system and ears? Number one. That's my first question.
No, it's all in. Right? Like, let's start with that, because I think that's a budget that most musicians, gigging musicians, working musicians can wrap their head around, right? This is a pretty common number, and it is the number that Amanda gave me. I didn't like morph her note into something but it's pretty common. It's like, okay, well, what can I do for $300? I want to spend $200, but I'm willing to spend $300 is really where that comes from. And so my my advice at that point is go wired. Do not think about going wireless yet. Go find universal fits, and Dan and I are going to talk through some options for universal fits here, and then you can do this for less than $300 easily. So
you want to try it though, and
that's the thing is this is going to be a test.
There's another piece of this though, and for anybody who hasn't ever used ears before, considering how much about most of the ears that are out there, the in-ears that are out there are the same. They all have a different sort of color to them. It's about what you like. And because it's not only subjective in terms of what it sounds like, but what's loud to one person is not loud enough for somebody else and vice versa. So you because of all those variables, you want to make sure that whatever you're going to spend your money on, that you like it. Like you
Yes.
want to audition your ears. You can, Amazon will let you send stuff back. Like if they don't sound good to you when you plug it into your iPad or your laptop or whatever, and you plug them in and you go like, that sounds like garbage. Well, they're not going to improve when you're on stage.
That's a great piece of advice, sort of buried in what you just said there, Dan. Is whatever you buy, and I think we're going to start with the earphones first. Yeah. Whatever you buy, plug them in to a source that plays music and listen to them.
Turn off all the EQs, no compressors, no sound check, like none of that stuff. Turn everything off. That's what we used to do in the old days. We used to have a shuffle. Had a shuffle with no controls on it. MP3s that weren't particularly great back then. They were 160s or whatever they were.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And just plug stuff in.
Yeah, listen to Spotify, listen to Apple Music. Make sure it sounds like what you think it should sound like. And if it sounds like crap, don't try to figure out how to make those earphones now work for you on stage. You are going to want it to sound different on stage than you do when you're listening to music, but that's okay. That's totally doable. Start with something that sounds good. So let me give you a couple of things for people so that they can do this. Okay. Let's share some like what would you recommend people buy? Let's give them 4 or 5 different options.
Here's the thing: when you're listening to any earpiece, any headphones, any speakers, you want to listen for certain things that will tell you whether or not they sound good. The first thing always is the sound of the human voice, because your brain will perceive the complete width of that. And if there's anything that makes you kind of wince or feels piercing, you're in the wrong neighborhood. Second thing is to listen for effects. Can you hear the decay of reverb? Can you hear the delay in the vocal, the slap? Can you hear fingers sliding on guitar strings? Can you feel the low frequencies without it going like that?
Sure.
It should be enough that nothing really peaks out at you in a way that makes you go, I'm only hearing that. They should be even across the spectrum.
It should sound musical.
For those things, that's right. If you listen across the board like that, and you're able to distinguish between the instruments and the effects, and everything feels even, and nothing makes you go, this hurts, or I'm completely missing something. Run. All right, take them back, return them, do whatever you have to do. And that's a real thing about not going into custom right away. If you go to custom right away, you're not returning them. They'll take them back, they'll refit them. Almost every company has the same policy on that.
Yes.
But because of that, when you're trying to get yourself into ears, when you're just starting out, remember that that's your audition. If they're not doing that before you send them back, make sure they fit correctly. And I know you and I have talked about this, and you've talked about it on the show. Try the fit options. When you put them in your ears, the sound around you should go away if they fit correctly. Your room, better than noise canceling, because most of the earpieces now have unbelievable rejection unless it's an ambient earpiece.
All right,
so,
we're gonna get into.
Yeah, so we're
gonna move on to the recommendations.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yes, I know, and we always do this, and me in particular. Okay, so in terms of the earpieces, it's very easy to fall into the marketing hole, because everybody tells you the same thing. Full, rich, blah, 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 blah. It's this sensitivity, that sensitivity. Basically, It depends on the sound you like for the instrument that you play.
All right,
so
Dan.
my recommendations are
there you go.
pretty cut and dry. On the entry level, the Sennheiser IE100 Pro.
Okay.
To me, for the money, it's $100 for the earpiece.
$98 on Amazon, folks.
Okay.
Yep.
It's a clean sounding piece. It's very well made. It fits comfortably. They give you a reasonable amount of fit options. And as a starting point, as an entry level piece, I think it's a great earpiece.
Great.
That's number one. The second one that I like, and for a million reasons, is Futuresonics has the G10. The G10, which sells for $160 with their coupon code when you log into the site, is a very custom sounding earpiece. They give you a whole bunch of different fit options, and you can add the Comply foam sleeves aftermarket, which also sound really great if you're wearing them a lot. And it gives you a little more extension. The P2 Comply foam tips are great for that.
Yep.
Third one.
Actually, I'm going to throw the third one in because we're about to break the $200 barrier, which is fine.
Yeah.
But before we do, I'm going to throw in the Linsol KZ SZ10s.
Mm-hmm.
These are $50. They are 5 drivers per ear, and they sound good. They are obviously, like anything, they're mass produced. I mean, you're buying buying 10 drivers and a shell for your ears for $50 or less. There's a $5 coupon on Amazon right now. But this is a great way to get started. I've seen so many musicians start with this and stay with it because they just like it. It like you said, Dan, one option that's good for one person is not necessarily just because it's universal fit, which is also a misnomer. It's not universal enjoyment, right? So try these out. And because you can buy these on Amazon, you can return them. So this would be a place that I've recommended many people go simply because of the price point. So, okay. So now
the thing about the earpieces that are $100 or less, all of them, are that they're mass-produced transducers and drivers. Mm-hmm. So they don't always have the consistency when you go from piece to piece. Again, you don't like it, send it back.
Send it back.
But you get a good one and you're in business. And it's a good starting point, assuming, again, they don't fatigue you too hard, which is definitely something to consider. Another one that is really cool, this company called Dunu, and a lot of people don't know about them.
I'd never heard of them before you mentioned them.
They were a worship leader presented these to me, and they had a model that they were very, very happy with, and they're surprisingly, the feel of them, the tactile appeal is very surprising, and they're $219. They make them in 2 colors, and they make other models as well, but this was one that stood out to me for the price, especially because now there are so many brands, and so a lot of them are the same. This is a technology that's a little bit different than what everybody else is doing, even though their marketing speak is over the top.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah. Okay, so you're recommending the Falcon Ultra from Dunu.
This Falcon Ultra is a really cool piece. After that, Audix makes a piece called the A10X. Okay. And it's a really solid feel. It's a great piece on stage. They're very comfortable. They have a nice width to the sound. My only issue with them was finding the right fit. Their fitting options, because everybody is like, every ear is like a fingerprint. You have to find what works for you. It's a very well-made piece. The way that the cable is designed is really substantial, and it's a robust earpiece that I really like a lot. And I think when you're trying to stay below $300, this is a really great bunch of options. For me, the difference between them is personal preference. It's what you like the sound of.
Yeah.
The Futuresonics I love, not just because I was part of the company until 2008, but because they carve out a little of the low mids that you get through conduction on stage. So when you're on stage, that's already taken into account. So they're very wide. They have more low end, but that's so that you don't have to boost your low frequencies. You can actually even back off the lows a little if it's too much, and it de-stresses your sound as opposed to having to boost anything. So when you listen, they're very comfortable, they're very light, but because they have that little scoop in the low mids, when you're listening like on a laptop, when you're on stage, everything feels like
unless it's a silent stage.
Well, it depends.
But again,
I mean,
like you said, this is all personal preference.
Yeah, it's there again. It's the smoothness, it's the natural sound, and for me, without having anything that scrapes at my ears, where I'm like, no, too much, too little, whatever. And there are all kinds of facets to this. Anyway, we can get into this because it's really easy to geek out on.
Here's the thing. Everything we just mentioned, from the $50 Linsols through the $100 Sennheisers up to the $200, well, $220, $230 Dunus and Audixes, all of these, if you find one that works for you and you use it for whatever, a year, 2, 3 years, and then decide, hey, yep, I'm ready. I want to move on to customs. Keep these. These are now your backups, right?
100%.
And you know, if something goes wrong on the gig, or you need to send your customs in for a cleaning or something, and they don't come back in time, well, you've still got something. You're not just pulling some headphones out of a drawer like, I guess I'll try these. You know, you've got something you've got some experience with. Now, I said there was an asterisk when I said that I couldn't recommend any customs if you want to do this all in, because we still have to talk about a headphone amplifier or some way to get this sound between the mixer and your headphones, because most mixers only have one headphone jack. Yes, you can use that. I use it often on mine, but I have to be ready not to be able to use the headphone jack for my in-ears. So I figure we need to be at, where we are, 230 and below, in order to leave a little bit of room up to that $300 price point to buy a headphone amp. And we'll talk about those in a minute. The one custom option that exists is somebody we've talked about years ago. I haven't tried out their new ones, but Waves Custom, WAVS. You can buy their dual drivers that start at $200 per ear. Triple drivers are not per ear, per pair. So it's $200 per pair for their dual drivers, $300 per pair for their triple drivers, all the way up to $600 per pair for their 6 driver per ear. The trick to these is that they've figured out how to do these at a price point that fits with this question, but they've also skipped the need for you to go and get your ears molded, which if you recommend, and I'll link to this episode when we talked about the All Clear in-ears, I talked about my recent experience getting ear molds done. And most ear doctors, most audiologists were going to charge me somewhere in the $150 to $250 range to get molds done for both of my ears. I found one that would do it for $75. With Waves, you get to skip all of that because they figured out a way to use the Face ID camera on your iPhone, which is essentially a 3D sensor, to do a mold of at least enough of your ear to get this custom thing together. I tried Waves when they first came out years ago, and I was impressed with them. Paul and I both tried them. I have not tried their newest ones. I can only imagine that they've gotten better, but I haven't tried them yet. But that's so $200 and you can go in.
2 pieces to that. One is that they don't go particularly deep because of that.
Yes.
Which is an odd fit. So it's sort of a hybrid-y kind of a fit.
In fact, they will sell you a hybrid. Their default is that the outer portion of your ear is the custom part, and then the part that goes, the tip of it, if you will, is a universal fit tip.
Here, the bowl of the ear, and that's the thing. There's one more company which I didn't mention, which is Juicy Ears. Oh. What a bizarre... I don't know why the name gets to me.
My ears get a little juicy. Sometimes I need to clean them. We'll talk about that.
They have also in that same space as Waves. They've come up with an affordable earpiece. Sounds pretty good, but they're very comfortable. It's a really nice fit, nicely made. And I have some friends that are using them now that like the sound of them. Yeah.
Oh,
that's another
good to know.
In that
Love
price
it
category. Yeah.
Yeah. It looks like they start at $298 So I will put those in the show notes too. So giggabpodcast.com, that's where you're going to find all the links for all the things that we've talked about and are about to talk about. And since we're here, let's talk about the getting the sound between the mixer, which is going to give you either a 1/4 inch or an XLR, and your ears, which are going to be headphones. So you need a headphone amplifier that can take this stuff, hopefully one that has a limiter in it, or that you can at least control the mix on. I, for years, have been a huge, huge fan of the Rolls PM50 series of things. It keeps changing. I think we're up to the PM50S now. Maybe we're up to the PM50 SE. I don't know. But that's...
You and I have been talking about the Rolls stuff for years. And they were years ago, even going back to when I was a Future Sonics, that was one of the go-to compact.
Yeah, because you can buy it for $50.
Yeah.
Like
they're really cool.
Yeah. In fact, I'll look on Amazon while we're talking here, but I'm pretty sure that it's still about $50 to buy this on Amazon. And so...
And I like it more than I like some of the other ones that are out there. There's today, a Personas one and Behringer one, and they're all companies have these basic ones, but the Rolls is still a fortress. This little thing, even with the changes
my only complaint, my biggest complaint about the Rolls, because I got one 20 years ago because it was like the only game in town when I started using in-ears. And I still have that one, but I decided I should have a spare because of what we talked about here. And the writing, like there's labels. It's a black box with white lettering on it that
just decals.
Tells you what to plug in where and what the knobs do and all that stuff. My new one is maybe 18 months old, and I can't read it anymore.
Yeah.
Like that, but my old one, which had bounced around in the same gig bag that the new one bounces around in, clear as a bell. So clearly they're doing something different. I've gotten to the point where I actually need to take a screenshot of this and put it on my phone so that I mostly remember what's where, but
we talked about that once before when they made the changes. And I remember talking about that.
Yeah.
The thing that makes this introduction for anybody who has never used ears that wants to jump in, even in a club or even a coffee house or wherever you are, is because we're in a world now in a lot of places where they have powered wedges, you're not getting an amplified signal down and down to your monitor. So if you unplug that, even if it's a speak on or whatever it is, you can get an adapter for that because it's not a powered signal. Plug it into your headphone amp and away you go, and you just tell whoever is sending you your aux what you want. If it's two, even better. But when it's from wedges, it's a mono send.
It's a mono send, yeah.
And it's actually kind of amazingly cool. So
it's really easy now to get an XLR from the house.
Yeah, because you're just changing the aux from a wedge to what you're getting. You just have them start from nothing. Yep. And you're good to go. Oh, that was loud.
Everything all right?
Yeah.
But if are there any other headphone amps that you want to mention while we're in the headphone amp category here?
So I mean, there's so much that you can get into with this stuff, and because the way that the technology has emerged, the thing that for me is always been amazing about finding what works and what doesn't is by going with what sounds best first.
Yes.
I
hear Dan rustling through a bunch of papers to find something.
Because I really want to make sure that we're not getting beyond where people are just starting out.
Well, we can give ourselves at this point with all the headphones that we have recommended, and then this Rolls PM50 amp. We have satisfied we've understood and completed the assignment, right? The answer is good. You've got your Rolls. Okay. You can pick a headphone amp. Any of those headphones, including the Waves Custom and the Rolls amp, you're still less than $300. I would spend any extra dollars on two things. Number one, an extension cable, a headphone extension cable, so that you can get from wherever your amp is
Right.
to your your body, which is where the earphones are going to be. And I highly recommend do not buy a black extension cable, because finding it in the dark when you're walking on stage, not so simple.
Use neon gaff on it if you have.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Buy a roll of that for that purpose
to find it. Yeah.
Okay.
And then also adapters, so that no matter what front of house gives you, if they give you a quarter, I mean, with the rolls, you can take a 1/4 inch and an XLR in one direction, right? You can take a male XLR, I believe.
Yeah, you can do flips.
Flips
a flip. Are easy.
Bring a flip with you so that you can take a female XLR.
That's not where we get into trouble, Dave. Where we get into trouble
but I'm just saying.
The speak-ons. Where we get into trouble is with if it's TRS and you don't realize that it's not wired TRS, that somebody did it themselves, or so. I always keep and I always encourage people to get both male to female, female to male, 4 different variations of speak-on male to male XLR to male 1/4 inch and vice versa, female to you never know, because sometimes, and this is actually kind of cool, sometimes you have a powered wedge that actually has a throughput on it, that you don't have to pull everything. All you have to do is turn down the wedge, and you have a little preamp for yourself. It's not always perfect, but you go with what sounds
it's functional.
Best. Yeah. Right. But that way you're not like pulling wedges and whatever. Sometimes you don't have that luxury. But if you have a wedge that has throughput and you go like, oh, I have this speak-on to 1/4 inch, away we go.
Away you go.
And you're done. And it's
just
a lot
make
easier.
Sure it's not powered coming in. You want to know that.
And even if it's so, if it's powered, and I don't recommend this. So Radial makes like these soaker boxes, and what is it called? An L something 2 or whatever it's called.
It's a power soaker, something that takes it down.
Yeah, and it's meant for that, and it's not, if you needed to get the job done, it's fine. I don't recommend it. It's you can do it though. And again, those are those instances where you have to decide, am I going to bother using the ears, or am I going to put plugs in? Because sometimes it's a little of each. Sometimes, you can you use a more ambient earpiece, or you use a universal, and you use a lighter fit. Not necessarily, but if you have to, it's not necessarily what I would recommend. So in terms of when you get into real headphone amps, I say real stuff that I think are about the best you can get. And I think it's critical to have that, not only because they sound great on their own, but because if you use it with a P16 or an ME1 or a hearback system, and hearback systems have really nice headphone amp sections actually.
So we're talking about the mix it yourself units on stage that you've seen. We talked about it with Matt Musty when he was here. Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay.
Whether or not you have one of those, there are 2 that I think are amazing. One is
Dan froze.
Albatross. Okay. Albatross Audio has this PH9C. It's the newer version. It now has an aux option. This is a product that's been designed over many years by this wonderful guy, Robert, who's worked with every big name. It's just an incredible product. It's very simple. It's rock solid. It just sounds amazing. There's nothing else I need to say about it.
Well, actually, I have a question. That if you have nothing else to say about it, I have a question.
Yes.
Where can one buy one of these? Because you gave me a list of stuff you might mention in the show. I could not find this for sale on Albatross's website, nor could I find it anywhere. Everybody that did list it says it's out of stock.
Yep. You contact him on his website, and his email is, I think it's just Robert at Albatross.
It's right there.
Whatever it is.
Yep.
And you say, I want one. Build me one, and they're for $450 or whatever, $400, whatever they are. And the cost factor is the thing, because when you think about if you spent $1,000 on your bass, let's say, and you play your bass and you're playing through these earpieces, whether they're $50, $100, $300, $600, $2,000, $5,000, whatever they are.
Yeah.
And your $1,000 or $3,000, $500, whatever bass or keys or snare drum or whatever it is, it's worth every single penny when you hear the amount of love that this guy has put into this product.
That
And you
makes
plug
sense.
your ears in, and your ears, which already hopefully sound great, you go like, oh, this is what I was going for. It's
I will
the
say
most
when I
well-tuned,
moved,
yeah.
when I moved on my computer, very different application, but the same thing applies. You know, you've got a quality amplifier here. When I moved on my computer to the built-in preamp for, you know, that you could plug into speakers, just a computer in my office, to an external one that had an external DAC and discrete power and was built with love and all of those things, it sounded like I got brand new speakers. It's amazing what difference it can make, and the sound, the stereo field got wider and all that. I have not tried this Albatross PH9C, but I have no doubt that the right amp, and this is probably one of them, would do the same thing for one's ears. Yeah.
This box, it doesn't matter what brand, it doesn't matter what type of driver, it doesn't matter anything.
Yep.
When you plug into this box and you listen, you go like, okay, I'm never going back to the old way ever again.
When Dan first sent this to me, I said, no, don't tell me about this, because I don't want yet another thing to have to plug in.
Oh, it's so good, Dave. I'm telling you, it's so
I believe you.
good.
All right,
Okay,
so let's say
second
I
piece.
want another thing to plug in. What would the next one be? Yeah.
Okay. The other one is Neve makes this RNHP2, which is, or RNHP, is it whatever it's called, the one, or anyway, it's a stereo headphone amp.
Yep.
The Neve, the quality of this headphone amp, and this is a little more expensive. This is
$600 on Amazon, and you can buy that today. I'll put a link in the show notes.
And the thing about the Neve stuff, and I've said it over and over, and I will say it again. If Neve made flip-flops and they were called the RNFF2s or whatever, I would own them, because the build quality, the sound quality, the way that the signal path through this thing, and it's so simple. Just like their direct box, the RNDI direct box, I think, is for the money one of the cleanest sounding. It doesn't have the color that some of the big fancy tubes and whatever, but the RNDI is absolute, just transparent, beautiful, rich sound. And that's the same thing with the headphone amp. And it's very small. The headphone amplifier is very small. It's capable of driving quite a bit of ohmage, if you will. And it's a really, really great sounding piece. I personally prefer the Albatross, only because not just the price point, but because it's made specifically for in-ears.
Yep.
So you get that contour that's just this lush,
Got
beautiful sound. I think it's for the money. I think it's the best bang for the buck, especially if you're stationary, if you don't need wireless. That's really cool.
All right. So now I want to talk about, thank you, by the way. This is great. Hopefully you folks out there are, hopefully we're crafting this into a narrative that makes sense and comes along, and we've given you the right answers in the right order and all those things. Feedback at giggabpodcast.com if we've left anything unsaid, although
I don't think
we're
that's
not
possible.
finished. Right. Yeah. We're not finished yet. But always, please ask. I want to talk about Earz mixes and the way to get a good one. And I know this is a bit of a rehash of a conversation that you and I and Paul had years ago, but it's the right time to have it. I just finished this run of 8 gigs, 7 of them in the same spot at the theater. They've got an Allen and Heath system there, which has the Aviom style boxes. The ME1. That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Where you get to dial your own mix in. And I dialed my mix in, and we're going to talk about how I did that, because you have a good story about that. And then I went to the Music Hall Lounge to play our gig on Sunday night. And we were, it was a quick setup. We, standard kind of show up and like sound check and play. And the guy was like, "Oh, I have your file from last year, so I'll bring up your mix." I never got, I had a functional mix all night. It was not the best. I think And this also happened at the theater, but we were doing a long enough of a run that I kind of stopped things and worked it out with the engineer. As soon as I put headphones in, I noticed at the theater, that the acoustic guitar was distorting. And he's like, no, I can see on the meter it's not distorting. And I'm like, he's like, it doesn't sound distorted in the house. I'm like, yeah, but like do me a favor, take 2 dB off of it. He's like, it's going to be really low. I'm like, okay, well, you still got plenty of headroom for the house. I'm like, just take 2 dB off. All the distortion went away. So I always say we need to mix with both our eyes and our ears. Trust, if your eyes are telling you something, believe that. If your ears are telling you something, also believe that, right? You need to use both as tools. And I've made the mistake of not doing that when I podcast. I had an issue, 3 weeks ago, Dan. I use this app called Sound Desk as my mixer to do the show now.
You mentioned that.
And I started doing a show and I could tell in my ears, I'm like, I'm hearing a little breakup and distortion. And I looked in Sound Desk and I'm like, nope, there's no issue. So I'm going to believe the meters. At the end of the episode, I went to quit Sound Desk and I noticed that it had opened my file twice. So it was mixing the show and sending out twice the signal to my ears, to the output that's recording. And sure enough, there was a little bit of top end distortion on the whole thing. Trust your ears. So I did trust my ears at the theater. He brought it down 2 dB. So everybody was like, oh my gosh, my ears mix is now amazing. It's like, well, yeah. I think the same thing or a similar thing was happening with the drum overhead mic on Sunday night. And it didn't dawn on me until after the show. And I asked the guy, I'm like, how much of that do you use in the house? He's like, well, in this room, not terribly much. I'm like, okay, just listen to it on headphones next time you're going to use it, because it might be distorting, even though, because I could see the meters on my mixer on stage too, because I was using the app for the M32 and it was like, it was nowhere near peaking out, but I don't know, like sometimes it just happens. Yeah. So
there's a lot to that. And
what is the Dan East method of getting a good in-ear mix? Is like, what do we do here?
The thing for me is to not just get the mix and have a starting mix, but to reset your mix routinely. And once a month, if you're working once a week or every week, whatever it is, you want to make sure that, because you tweak as you go, especially if you're on a satellite
mid-show,
mixer, on a personal mixer,
you're tweaking. Yeah,
there are things that happen. People get more energy, less energy. They make adjustments, and you make adjustments. So when you're starting at the beginning, when you either reset or if you're just getting into this, the thing to make sure is that you're starting with the cleanest possible signal. So you turn everything down. Don't look at what's on there. One of the things the ME1 does really well is if you hold the shift key down and you turn the knob, everything is controlled and you can bring everything down at once.
Wait, seriously? I didn't know that.
Yep.
That thing's got so many hidden features. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing to be able to do that.
So you can just bring it all down.
Everything. Oh. Now, if you have you don't have enough snare, you hold that shift key, you turn everything down, then you go to your snare either in the group or that, and then you can bring that and then bring the master up. Then you don't have to turn your snare up. Once you're at unity on that thing, if you go beyond that, that's where you end up with your noise. So if you use your master volume, that's one thing that people forget is that's where you contain that distortion, because even though what's inside most of those little satellite mixers is a little chip amplifier, it doesn't have a lot of muscle to it, but it's enough that if you set it up so that it doesn't hiss and make noise when you start, that's the magic. So how do we do this? I think of it this way. If you walk in to... So
you're saying start from zero?
Yep. I say all zero. We start from all zeros.
Okay.
You assuming you're hardwired, and you turn up your whatever amplifier, whether it's an ME1 or a P16 or whatever it is, you turn it up. If it hisses, turn it up until it hisses and then back off. And you want to back off even a little further than that so that you have room to turn up another 5 or 10% if you need it. So you find your noise floor and you start with silence.
Oh,
really, really important to start with silence. Okay. Then you start, because everybody's complaint is I can't hear myself. The more me thing is always a thing. So you start with you. You start with your voice or your instrument. Drummers, we do a little differently, but whatever that is, you start with you. One of the things the ME1 does, and a few of them will do this, is that on an ME1 you can set up a group, so your drums can be on preset 1, as you're seeing there.
Sure.
And then you click on group, and then you can do kick, snare, hat, rack, floor, overhead, left, overhead, right. And then you have like a bus, like you have a group that is your whole drum group.
Yes.
So even within that, you can make your adjustments. But then if you're playing on a quiet song and you're switching to hot rods or brushes or whatever, you can just bring your drum group up a little bit. But you need to have the room. The turn up thing is really dangerous.
Sure.
So if you start with silence, if you're on a wireless, even more so, you make sure you're not clipping. You make sure you're at -5-ish on your meter so that you have a little room if you need it. You know, there's a funny thing that happens. People talk about, like, when you have rehearsal, you're usually, 3 dB quieter than the show, if not more. There are certain instances where it's the opposite. For example, there's in a worship environment, sometimes people come in and they're, they've had Red Bulls and coffees and teas and everything. And rehearsal, when you do your run through, everybody's really, really amped up, and then the room gets filled up and everybody kind of relaxes a little, and they're not quite as loud, and everybody's more comfortable, and they can really, there's a stride that happens.
Yeah.
So it can go either way. So when you do this, you want to just be like, okay, I'm going to get my mix together, 1, 2, 3. The first time you do this, it's painful. Every time that somebody sets up their mix the first time, they go like, I don't know, it's not happening. It's weird.
I hate it. Yep.
So you start with the me. So when you need more me, you put yourself at 75%, your master volume, so you still have another 10% there if you need it.
Sure.
And then you build around that. One of the things that people don't realize, and this is a really important thing about all these little mixers, and especially with the wireless, is that even though you may have the sense of true stereo, particularly if you're using older systems, you're not really getting, they don't really have that separation in the way that the wireless works or in the way the little chip amplifiers work.
Yeah.
So you have this perception of really hard stereo, and there's crosstalk and there's distortion you don't need. So because of that, when you're building your mix, I think of me first. Yep. Whatever if it's my voice or if it's a voice, and I won't repeat what you've said on the show 1,000 times. If it's you and your guitar and you do it just a little bit left and right, maybe 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, not even that far, just so there's separation.
Yes.
If it's me as the drummer, my snare is 11 o'clock. It's exactly what you see. Nothing is hard panned. Your hi-hat would be 10 o'clock. Your toms would be maybe just off of 12, 2, 3. Nothing's super hard panned, and that's nice and clean and even. But for a singer, for a keyboard player, whatever. Okay, so you start with mono. Once you have you, then you want bass, assuming you're not sitting on top of your sub.
Yeah.
Okay. You have, as a singer or as a member of the band who's not the drummer, you have kick and snare, which again, you want a little split, especially if your vocal is in the center you and your guitar are not quite, 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock.
I have learned if I have stereo in-ears, and
always should if you can. Always if you can.
But there will be plenty of scenarios where you cannot.
Right.
And so, but if I can have stereo, my default is to have nothing in the middle, not even my vocal, right? And that way nothing gets muddy. If I need to put something in the middle because I need it ever present and like drilling into my head like a click track, or on a musical theater gig, I might put the MD mic, the music director's mic, dead center so that I never miss a cue from him, right?
For me, the only thing that's dead center is the bass, because as a drummer, I want my kick drum and the bass to be one thing.
Oh, interesting. I like to have them separate.
I want that marriage.
I got that. Yeah, but that's
again,
personal
not
preference.
On top of each other, just a little on either side.
Oh,
just
okay,
so that they don't
I do them a little. Well, but that's what I'm saying. Nothing stays at zero balance for me.
Well, it doesn't make sense to your brain as a drummer in particular, because if you look down, your right leg and your left leg aren't. It's not like your nose is on top of your right leg.
No,
it has to be the way it makes sense to your brain. It's also one less thing you have to think about. Okay. So
Yeah.
now you have your center, you start with you have your center. Then you want the absolute minimum. And one of the things that I always do because of the stereo image is no two things should occupy the same space in the stereo. So if you have two guitar players and they're at 10 and 2 o'clock as you see them. So if you're the front person singing and you have a guitar player on your left or a guitar player on your right, you want them panned so that when you look left and you look right, you see them where they are, so your brain doesn't go, huh?
Yep.
Okay. You only need enough of any given thing for where you need pitch and where you need the rhythm. You need to be aware of the percussiveness, and you need to be aware of the melody, or the lead line as they call it. Okay. After that, whatever you're putting in your ear mix is only going to muddy up the sound and take away from the intelligibility of what you're trying to do. So as much as everybody loves the idea of what they in the old days called a CD mix, if it sounds like the record, it's totally not necessary. You're not singing in the shower or in the car.
I heard somebody on a gig recently say to the engineer, "Yeah, just give me
everything.
Give me the mix of the mains." It's like, no,
don't do that.
No.
But
don't do that.
The thing that makes this usable is the fact that if you start with only what you need, and you talked about this a couple weeks ago, if you start with what you really, really need as your essentials, your melody, your bass player, your own instrument, and yourself, if you have more than 3 vocal mics open on stage, you're going to get enough bleed from that.
It's all coming in.
Right. And so you save your brain being overwhelmed with information. The other thing is it gives you a better mix. It gives you better levels.
A good, just like mixing front of house, your point about having, 3, 4, even 1, but the more the merrier, live vocal mic on stage. If they've got drum overheads coming through a vocal mic, they're not going to turn up the drum overheads in the front of house and add to that. They're going to listen to what's there and add as necessary, or dial in as necessary. Do the same thing for your ears. Don't just assume that you need everything. I mean, and I say this knowing that if you are on a gig with me, you will hear me do this go against my own advice with a sound engineer. If we have 3 minutes to dial in a mix on a sound check and I'm not in control of my own mix, I will tell them, all right, give me, my vocal at like you said, 75% or whatever. Give me all the other vocals at 60% and all the instruments at 50%. I can communicate that quickly. Is it exactly what I would want? No. Is it the best mix for me? No. Did I just communicate something efficiently that is going to get me from now until the end of the set? Yes.
Yeah. You need to know what gets you the information you need to perform well.
That's
you have a lead guitar player, like let's take just a standard rock band, all right? You have a lead guitar player, rhythm guitar player, you have them kind of split. You have your bass, you have your drums. Keys, for example, I don't generally put the left side of the keys. Keys are always sent in stereo, even if they're a stereo channel. We're in a digital world, okay? If there are 2 channels, ignore the left hand unless you don't have a bass player. If it's the Doors and raised, whatever. But if you don't need it, save those muddy frequencies so that you have more out of the low mids that you want to hear from your voice. All those frequencies collide, and I won't go too nerdy on this, but basically, if everything has its place in the stereo image and there's as little overlapping as possible, you will feel much more comfortable. And so I'll tell you how this went down, because I had, in my usual way, I had typed up all this stuff that I was going to talk about and everything, and how to do this and all the how-tos and everything else, because it really is very simple. It's really 10 steps. You start at the beginning, you make sure it's quiet, you make sure nothing's overloading, you start with yourself, whether it's your drums and or if you're like you and I, we sing as drummers, whatever it is, your primary thing and whatever goes around that. And then you build from that only what you absolutely need. So as I was going through all this stuff, there are plenty more variables, but here's the thing. It happened to me this past week, and I walked into this beautiful place, 500, maybe 600 seat or whatever, and they had these little P16s or whatever they were, and a singer comes over and she says, I can't make this work. We're going through sound checks. It sounds terrible. I hadn't listened to the Earz. I said, well, what's the difference? You play here regularly, yeah? She said, yeah, we play here all the time. What's different? Well, they made some upgrades to the wireless. And so the front of house had assumed that by having all the gains almost the same as what they were before, that they should theoretically have been the same and that the ear mixes wouldn't have changed as much. Well, nothing could have been further from the truth. At front of house, yes, they were metering, but the split, they cloned all the channels so that the ears were getting the split off the front of house. And so I went back and I plugged my ears in. I had no vocals. Nothing.
Oh?
Like 30%, maybe.
Sure. Yeah.
So I did the thing. And this is what I tell everybody. Turn everything down. Just
everybody's
zero.
Everybody's starts at zero. Yep.
Yeah. Turn the master and you find your noise floor. Good to go. Start with you. And I turned this vocal mic up and I was at maybe 80% and it sounded like, oh, this is great. I go to turn up the keys and I mean like 15% was too loud.
Oh.
I was like, okay, so our sensitivity on our wireless needs to change. And then we need to make this, because it's a split. Okay, so we figured out. So then I built a new mix, starting with me as on their mic, and built everything around and did the same exact thing that we just talked about.
Yep.
Start with the minimal, and then added tracks. Like the tracks were here on the left side, and I had the right hand of the keyboard just far enough apart, you know,
sure.
230-ish, whatever it was, and everything came together. And so I then saved it on a flash drive, and I walked around to all the mixers and updated everybody's mixer with the bed mix. We call it a bed, the jumping off point.
Yeah.
And so what I did was all the vocals were set basically evenly so that you had a starting point where nothing
add
was
more
peaking
of you
out
if you needed,
than anybody
sure.
else. And then you could go, okay, bass player, because all of our gain structure was now correct. And it was the first time, and when we finished, she walks over to me, she says, it's the first time I didn't have to touch my ears at all. She said, it was incredible.
Yes.
I was like,
when
I
it's
didn't have
right.
to think about anything. I just sang. But if you looked at it, if you went by what you saw, but no clipping on the wireless, no noise floor. The noise floor was non-existent. It was complete silence where it started. Everything was properly gained up, and it made sense. It looked wrong. It looked really wrong.
Well, that's it. You got to, you trust your ears and you trust your eyes.
Exactly.
It's right back to that. Like, but if one looks wrong, ask, what am I doing here? All right. So we are past our 1 hour mark here. We did promise to get into the gross part of this because I just finished spending whatever I said, 8 days shoving things in my ears, and I took a day off, and then here I am again. And this will continue, through the week. I think I'm going to a concert Thursday night, so I'll have earplugs in and, the whole thing. I had a moment when I was 17. I didn't have in-ear monitors, but I'd been wearing earplugs when I played and seeing shows for several years at that point. And I was walking home with my girlfriend from her house. We lived half a mile apart or something. And on the way home, I stopped being able to hear out of one of my ears. And I was like, what's going on? Like, this is terrible. So we got home and I told my dad, it was like a Saturday afternoon. And he's like, you just need to clean your ears out. So he pulls out this like blue ear syringe that clearly he had used. He's like, yeah. He's like, you just put some hydrogen peroxide in, you let it sit for a second, and then you flush it out with this.
It's the same thing you use for baby snot.
It's the same. It looks like the same.
Bulb.
Yeah, it's the little bulb syringe. Yeah, exactly.
The ear wash system. Yeah.
You can buy them for $14 on Amazon, and I'll tell you, sometimes I do this certainly once a year, if not twice a year, and I'm able to flush this stuff out, and sometimes very little comes out, and sometimes you would be shocked at what comes out.
Yeah, it's pretty gnarly.
It's pretty gnarly, but you can always hear better.
But you have to be careful of that, because well, here's the thing. Okay, there are a couple of factors to this. Okay, one is that once you begin cleaning them, you will need to always clean them. Because you
now know.
need cerumen is the earwax. You need cerumen. In Florida, you really want cerumen in your ears because it keeps the bugs and the mites and the okay. That there's a purpose to earwax. Okay, impacted earwax is different.
That's the
problem. Jam your
right.
plugs in, and eventually it compresses and compresses and compresses and compresses. It's the same thing as like you have to clean your dryer vent or it doesn't heat anymore, right?
Yep.
You have a dryer and the lint builds up in the thing. Okay, so a couple of things about this. You want to keep your ears reasonably clean. You want to allow your body, a healthy body, the same way you grow fingernails and everything else. You want some cerumen in your ears. You want that to live there. It's a very important thing to protect you. It's a line of defense, like nose hair.
No, this is really smart.
Trim, okay.
Yeah.
The other thing is that you want to stay away from some of these big, heavy-duty irrigation systems. Some of them are okay. They're better for your sinuses than they are for your ears in a lot of cases, which is important.
And I will say, neither of us are doctors. If you have even the slightest question about what you're going to do, talk to a doctor who knows you and your specific ears and body and all of these things. And I tell my doctors that I do this. I'll be like, oh yeah, I wear earplugs and ear monitors all the time, and so I wind up cleaning my own ears. And have that conversation with your doctors so that they know what you're doing too.
Even your primary care doctor,
even your PCP. Okay? Yeah, exactly.
The thing about caring for your ears is sort of like your eyes and your teeth. Like nobody really wants to go to the dentist, but you have to if you want to keep your teeth.
Sure.
Okay, so the thing that happens when you talk to your either, even if it's not an ENT or an audiologist, go to a specialist, go to an otolaryngologist who can actually look at the plumbing between your nose and your ears. That's why they're called ENTs, ear, nose, and throat. It's all connected. So if you have any hearing issue, if you leave a gig and you can't hear, shut everything off, stop, don't give your ears anything, and let your ears relax, okay? Because hearing fatigue can happen within about 12 seconds. If you are wearing an earpiece like a cheap, in the old days though, they were awful. When people were first jumping in, they would wear these really shrill, tinny earpieces that were consumer products. They'd put them in their ears. They'd blow up because they didn't have enough resistance to wear on stage. So they'd turn them up, and then all of a sudden they'd be on stage and they'd get dizzy or they'd lose pitch and I can't hear the note, because hearing fatigue, it works like any other fatigue in the human body. If you walk down the street in New York City or in San Francisco and you smell the city smell and you go like, oh man. And after a couple of minutes, you can't smell it anymore, even though you're still in the same place, because your brain will desensitize to it. Your brain will shut it off. It does that with sound. You hear people who work in movies and they work on green screens, and after a while, or on blue screens, and after a while, your brain shuts that color off. Your brain does that with sound. What'll happen is your equilibrium will go off, or you won't be able to sing, or you won't be able to hear. So you want to make sure that if that hearing fatigue kicks in and you can't hear those notes anymore, that you shut it down. Give yourself a break, walk away, stop, whatever you need to do. See a professional as quickly as you can. Not because something horrible is wrong, but because you need to know where your jumping off point is. The second thing is when you clean your ears, never use ear candles. This ear candle fallacy is a dangerous proposition. And it was a trendy thing for a while. The risk is so high. The benefits are not, they're just not that. It's gross, and everybody's like, oh, look, you use the ear candle and you pull this garbage out of your head. It's like, no. Use a simple ear wash. It takes less time, it's much less expensive, and you won't risk not only burning yourself, but doing serious damage to your canals, to your tympanic membrane, which is your eardrum. And
I will add to that, and I've done this, I don't recommend it. somebody for Christmas one year gave me one of those kits that you pair with your phone, and it's got a little camera on it, and you can dig the earwax out of the impacted wax out of your ear with the camera. Some people love watching these videos on TikTok. Sure, whatever. As with anything, something that goes that far into your ear, like you're not just flushing it out now, you are going in and scraping this stuff out. You're going to get really close to some of the really sensitive stuff in your ear. It can be cool. Talk about a hand-eye coordination exercise. It's like it breaks my brain when I use this thing. But
look around,
I don't recommend using this thing.
Know what you're doing. No, even if you don't know what you're doing. Look around, and if it looks having these little video otoscopes and things. If you look in your ear and it looks like you and I are both wearing red earpieces today, and if it's not that nice healthy pink color and it looks red like that, immediately go to a hearing specialist. Immediately. And I don't mean red like the color of when you put a flashlight behind your fingers and you go, look, my hand's red, as a kid. I'm talking about if you look in your ear with one of those little LED light with the camera on it, and you're looking at your phone and you see what's clearly tissue that is unhealthy, immediately stop. Always, always, always. And people also think that audiologists, which in most hearing aid centers have them, that it's not a huge expense. People are always saying, oh man, I don't want to go to you want to go to a good one. It's easy to find a good one. All the, as you talked about on the show before, all the ear companies can refer you to somebody. But if you go to somebody locally, you talk to your primary care physician, you say, I need someone to really check beyond just looking in my head. Something's clearly wrong and I saw it. Can I get it checked out? It's not a huge expense, and you will save. It's as important as a musician. You don't want to damage your hands. Imagine if you damaged your ears. Think of you're dead in the water.
You're dead. Yeah,
I mean,
it's not good.
But anyway,
so clean your ears, but be careful doing it. Just know that you're doing something atypical to your ears when you're putting earplugs in all the time or putting ear monitors in. You will wind up with this, and it makes a huge difference if once you get that impacted stuff out. You can I'll
the
never forget
simplest way is always the best way. If you have to use the ear wash 5 times, it's still better. Because some people use it once and they go like, I really know.
Oh, it didn't work. Oh no, I probably fill like a small like tumbler glass with fairly warm, not hot, but definitely not cold water. And I basically empty the glass. No, you don't want to burn it, but you also don't want it to be cold. I fill it. I fill the glass, and then I use basically all of the water in the glass on one ear. And then I fill the glass again, and I use all the water in the glass on another ear, which is probably...
There's a good trick for that too, Dave.
What's that?
If you go to any beauty supply place and they have those little tubs for washing hair that have the little notch out of it where you put your head back, it's the little plastic container.
Yeah.
If you put your head on the side of one of those and you use the wax, you're over the thing, it doesn't go anywhere. You can use warm water, squeeze it, let it drain out. You have to wait. The trick to using the ear wash, this is so nasty, is when you put the drops in, you have to wait until it bubbles up in your ear.
Because it will drive you if you use the peroxide.
But it works great.
I don't always, because I've gotten to a point where I know what I can do with my ears. But if they're pretty bad, you put some peroxide or whatever the wash is in.
You want the wash. Don't use like straight hydrogen peroxide. Like don't buy a bottle of peroxide and pour it in your head. Like the washes are a certain percentage.
You want to dilute it down.
No,
you're right. Use the stuff that's meant for your ears.
Yeah.
But I'll lay on one side, like I'll put a towel down, I'll lay on the couch or whatever and watch like a show for 10 minutes because it takes 10 minutes for that to bubble. And it is it will itch. It will itch so badly and you just got to leave it alone. But it does help. So
when are you posting that video?
Oh, no. But there's plenty of them on TikTok, man. People
it's wicked.
Yep, it's out there. All right, that's a good ending point. Also, we're an hour and 13, hour and 14 in. Yeah. Dan, tell people where they can find you, my friend, please.
The two easiest places to find me are my website, which is danieleast.net.
Okay.
The other is on LinkedIn, which is linkedin.com/in/Daniel East,
Okay.
which is sort of more of my background, but that is linked from my main website. Even
Got
though
it.
my main website is a little out of date.
Sure.
It's the Shoemaker's Child.
I understand. Thanks
An
for hanging
equally
out.
old reference, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. Kids, ask your parents. Thanks for hanging out with us, Dan. Thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. Feedback at giggabpodcast.com. Make sure you sign up for the mailing list right there at giggabpodcast.com. Dan, you got 3 words to share with everybody before we say goodbye?
Always be performing.
And we're out. Sweet.